A big welcome to Penny Sharpe. Give us a wave, Penny, for joining us for this month's In Conversation. My name's Lucia Heath. I'm CEO of Women for Election. I would like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Gadigal and the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, and I would like to pay respect to elders past, present, and to future leaders emerging as well, and to say that sovereignty of this land was never ceded. And it's my belief that until we reach treaty with First Nations people, then our ability to move forward together in harmony is compromised. Feel free to put in the chat where you are joining us from today. I know that you're from the four corners of the country, so thank you for your time. I'm very excited about this interview today, and one of the reasons I'm so excited is some of you will know, but some of you won't know that I was an attendee at the first ever Women for Election conference held in New South Wales Parliament in 2017. Ooh, that feels like eons ago now. And it obviously fizzed me up to an extent because I ended up running the next year and ended up being the CEO the following year. So now I met Penny at that inaugural training conference, and we did what was called a World Cafe, where we had women both from the Legislative Council and the Legislative Assembly of New South Wales Parliament flood the room and start circulating around the room for the next 90 minutes, talking to us about their journey into politics, and with a bit of a, you can ask me anything remit. Penny left a resounding impact on me, because one of the things she said was, yeah, I meet up with all the other women all the time in this council. We have a WhatsApp group, and whether they're the opposite side of the chamber or whatever. And I went, what? Really? Why don't we ever hear about that kind of collaborative nature about Parliament? And we're not saying that it isn't rough and tumble as well, but it did leave a resounding impact on me about why we need to talk about the positive aspects that happen in Parliament to balance the negative aspects that we hear all the time. So, Penny, I don't know if you knew that you had inspired me that way, but you had. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Well, look, let's get into it. As usual, it'll be a Q&A between you and I, and then we'll open it up to questions from our alumni. But I always like to go backwards a little bit, take a step back, and talk about your life before politics. Do you consider that you were always a political animal? Did you have a career that you spent a lot of time in before politics? Give us a bit of insight into Penny Sharpe before elected positions.
Sure. Thanks, Lucia. Thanks so much for having me. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Look, I became involved in politics formally through party politics. I don't know how much people know about me, but I'm a member of the Labor Party. I joined the Labor Party when I was 19 years old, and that was as a result of moving. I grew up in Canberra with with politically interested, but not party politically active or members of parties or anything. Parents. My parents were public servants, and so were very big on the fact that they actually served whichever government of the day without fear or favour. It was a very big thing in my house. And I, as a young woman, became sort of more interested in really injustice in the world and the things that I saw around us. And I had this just general view that we could do better, that humanity actually has the skills to be able to fix our problems in a way that actually helps more people than it currently does. That was what I would probably have said then, though, was that I was a very opinionated 19-year-old who thought that it was unfair that education was not going to be coming free, that, women couldn't, I grew up in Canberra. Women's reproductive rights has been a big issue for me my entire life. The fact that young women couldn't access legal abortion services in the ACT. There's a whole range of things that I cared a lot about. I spent a lot of time arguing with people about it. And really the move to Sydney for me was, I have to stop talking about this. I actually have to take some action. And the decision for me was that I thought that I should put my money where my mouth was, and I probably joined the Labor Club at the University of New South Wales. Now, I never thought I was going to be an MP. That was not my aim. I went to UNSW to study food technology. I thought I was going to be a microbiologist. That was where I thought my life trajectory was going. It's just that I had this real interest in the world, the environment, and it just was, I cared about those things, and I really wanted to, not just talk about them. So I joined the Labor Club, probably didn't go to anything for months and months and months, but over time grew in confidence from the shy Canberra kid, and joined, got very involved in student politics, but again, very I was in the applied science faculty. Applied science people normally weren't interested in joining the student union. So they were I got elected unopposed the first time I put my hand up, because no one,
Perfect.
And so the Labor Club were very happy to have me as well, because it's like, oh, great, we don't even have to campaign for you. You just get elected. This is great. So look, that was really, for me, it was just that the Labor Party spoke to me in terms of being a party of government, and being able to where I thought I could have some impact on change, which was really what it was about. And I really joined the Labor Party actually to fight against what the Labor Party was doing at the time, which was putting HECS in place. So I was one of the first. That's sort of why it gives you how old I am. My father had only gone to university, first person in his family because of Whitlam, and that was the only reason he ever got to go to uni. And so for me, the idea that we were getting rid of free education was something that I was motivated against. I suppose I took a slightly different path, and the path was, I want to be inside the tent to try and stop this from happening. Obviously, I failed, but for me, there was that was really my introduction to that. Fast forward along, I became very involved in student politics. Education was a real passion for me. As I said, women's rights was a big thing. This is at the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis. I was coming out as a lesbian at that period of time. Was really involved in the campaigns around that, and got more involved on campus on things like student housing, and even campaigns at the time of getting Sharpe bins into the toilets when we were dealing with the kind of the spread of AIDS, which at the time no one knew what was going on. So I got very involved in student politics, and that led to what a lot of people consider a fairly traditional path into Parliament, which was, yes, I became the president of the student union. I went on to be the president of the National Union of Students. I came back to Sydney to finish being a food technologist. And look, the long and the short of it was that I'd pretty much had a falling out with my family because I'd come out as gay, and I was kind of on my own when I came back. And so I ended up getting this really great job, which was one of the great passions of my life, which was with this bizarre organisation called the Australian Student Traineeship Foundation. My job was to travel around New South Wales, work with local schools and local businesses to set up programs where kids could do more than work experience in their transition out of high school. It was really about skills in communities, community partnerships, jobs for kids to keep them in the community, particularly those that weren't going to go to university. So it was a really great job. But the other thing about it was that it was set up under Paul Keating's One Nation to actually bypass all the bureaucracy of New South Wales Education Department. So it was incredibly flexible. We got to just do these great programs with community. And I was doing that. Yeah, it was fantastic. It was just fantastic. It was a great, I just got poverty forced me to get a job. It meant that I never finished my uni degree, which is one of the few regrets I have in my life, but that is just what happened. And so I did that. And then I was just, and at parallel, I was sort of still involved in the Labor Party. And I just got more involved over time. People asked me to run for local government at Marrickville, so I live in the inner west.
Yeah, well, I want to focus on that actually, because I can see our alumni. I mean, there's a lot in what you just said, Penny, but some of the things that I hear over and over is I wanted to get involved. And I saw injustice, and I see that so much from the women who attend our events and those that go on to decide to run, and have extraordinary lived experience often in what they are trying to change. So, but our alumni, even on this screen, I can see those who have been elected, got themselves elected, those who have run but are not elected yet, and those who have focused on local government. Now you were a councillor with Marrickville at the local government level. Did somebody have to tap you on the shoulder to run for that? Was it a natural part of your student union elected? Okay, so give us a little bit of.
No, I never thought of it as doing that. Never thought that I was doing it. I was very involved in the local Labor Party. I've been involved. So I live in Anthony Albanese's electorate, and actually, sort of in parallel, my partner was working for him at that time. So I've been very involved locally. I'd supported our local candidates on Marrickville Council. I thought that it was a really good progressive Labor team. It was, and so I just sort of done lots of, just really supported their campaigns because I liked campaigning and I wanted them to win, and I liked what they were doing. They were very big on open spaces and parks. By that stage, I had a little baby. Those sort of things were really important to me. And and then they were looking for people to run. The Labor Party is really focused very heavily on making sure that we run half women, even though, we had formal rules around affirmative action, but even then we were starting to look around and people were approaching women all the time. And I was one of them. And they said, do you want to run? And I, of course, said, oh no, I couldn't possibly do that. And I don't know enough. I don't know what to do. I don't know, all of those things. And more sensible heads than I, including many men, basically said, no, you're running and we're putting you on the number one spot in your ward. And you will get elected. And we want you to be part of that.
No pre-selection, you didn't have to go through
any. No, I didn't have a pre-selection. No, I was very lucky. There was a bit of pushing and shoving in terms of the order, because there was one of my lovely friends who's now dearly departed. He was very keen to be number one, but others basically said, look, you run at number two, and we want to put Penny at number one. We want to have half women on the ticket, clearly in winnable spots, all of those things. And so that's how I ended up on council. But if I hadn't been asked, there is no way I would have put my hand up.
Yep. Well, on average, the data shows it takes 5 taps on the shoulder, Penny, for a woman to run. So obviously we're trying to contribute to that being 1 tap or less. But it's interesting because you had time on your tenure on council overlapped with your tenure in the state parliament. So
don't recommend. In fact, they've changed the law. You're not allowed to do it anymore either, which is exactly wise. It was a very busy, difficult time, I've got to
say. So again, now I am not dismissing at all your journey into politics, but so far it's been pretty good, like onto student union and then onto council. Was the state election a similar glide path, or was it more?
No, look, again, I would just have to say that I've been very, very lucky. One of the things I would say to everyone on the call, which I say particularly what I do with young women, is timing and opportunity is often as important as the best laid plans. Mm-hmm. That's been my experience. So again, when I was on local government, I didn't think that I was going to be running for parliament at all. That's why I'd committed to being on local government. I was really loving the work. I was loving the immediacy of all of that and the things that you could change. And look, again, a series of events occurred. In a nutshell, the local member was Carmel Tebbit. People remember her, Deputy Premier, became Deputy Premier. She had been in the upper house. Andrew Shorgy had been the local member, and he retired. And the other thing to know too, and again, I follow a fairly traditional path with a lot of Labor MPs. I'd stopped doing my job where I was helping kids do transition. I'd wanted to get more involved in decision making, and Carmel Tebbit, who I met in Young Labor, as she was the president of Young Labor when I met her all those years ago, she rang me up one day and said, I'd really like you to come and work for me. And so by then I was working as a staffer. And anyway, these things all sort of coalesced. Andrew Shorgy left. There was going to be a by-election. Labor was very worried about whether we would hold it. We were very keen to run a woman. Carmel, who was a great mentor to me and one of the best premiers we never had. She, after lots of toing and froing, she decided that she was going to run for the state seat of Marrickville because it was a by-election. Labor was in government. We were worried that we weren't going to hold it. Carmel had been the deputy mayor at Marrickville. She was very well known, very well regarded. So she decided to resign from the upper house and then go to the lower house. To cut a long story short, I was extremely lucky. This does not usually happen. It was just sort of the timing aspect was very important. We needed to fill the upper house vacancy very quickly. The Labor Party wanted to replace Carmel with a woman, obviously the same faction as her. They were also keen in terms of more diversity. And so me being openly gay was a positive, not a negative. And I had the support. I'd been very involved at the time too, by this stage, by a decade, doing a lot of policy work within the Labor Party. So all of our conferences, when we set our policy agenda, I'd been a policy coordinator. I was very well known internally within the Labor Party. And it was the first time, although I wasn't tapped, I actually put my hand up, and I was very lucky because everyone went, yeah, okay. So that is unusual. Since then I've been through 4 pre-selections. So I was very lucky, but I got in through that series of events.
That's so interesting to me, and something that you said about timing. I mean, we can't say it enough. We cannot say it enough at all of our training events that, well, 2 things. Timing is everything, and that you will never feel ready, but step forward anyway. You will never feel ready, ever. Even after you've done our wonderful courses, you still won't feel ready, but step forward anyway. And if some disruption has occurred that you can be a part of, then your likelihood of being able to get elected through that scenario is elevated so much more. So,
but also the chance that the circumstances may not be there again, like the things may not align in that way. That's the big one, and that's always the hardest thing. You think, oh, I've got time, and sometimes you do have time, but sometimes you don't. And knowing that you've just got to do it, even if the timing's not great, it's just, I think, it's only you can judge that. But I wouldn't. If the first thing is it's not the right time, you need to rethink that, because it might be the only time.
Everybody Google the Overton window after this for a little bit of insight into timing. So you're in the Legislative Council, so in New South Wales Parliament. You've had an impressive career in that. Up comes 2015, and you took the opportunity at that point to resign. You resigned because of an opportunity that had presented to possibly get the seat in the Legislative Assembly. Walk us through that in terms of, had it always been your focus? I do think I know what you're going to answer there, but
well, just to quickly go back. So part of when Carmel was deciding about whether she's running for Marrickville, that was when people had talked to me about maybe you should run for Marrickville. And so there was some toing and froing about whether, that was, I suppose, the first time I'd ever contemplated really running for the lower house. But I was very pleased when Carmel did it. This is before I knew I was going to get her spot in the upper house. I was just pleased because I thought she was the best candidate to win that seat for Labor, which was what I thought was more important. Yeah. The decision to run, so there was a new state seat created, which is the seat of Newtown. And again, Labor was looking for who would be a good fit for that community. And essentially I've lived in the inner west most of my adult life, except when I was out at UNSW. My partner and I at the time have 3 children. We've gone to local schools, we've been involved in that. I was a Marrickville councillor. I had some profile in relation to that community, and we thought, and look, it's a very progressive community. It's not a Labor Liberal contest, it's a Labor Greens contest. And the view very much was, look, we think you're probably the best person that we can put forward, who's got a profile, who could do this. Sort of the discussion within the Labor Party. And for me, it was like, look, I've done the upper house for a long time. I don't know whether I can win this, but also felt really passionate about my local community. And I thought, well, here's the time to really do that. The interesting thing about that, though, was that I put my hand up, but I actually had to go through a community pre-selection to become the Labor candidate. So while there were people who were encouraging me to do it, and I decided in my mind that, yes, I did think probably I was the best candidate to run, we actually went through this new process called a community pre-selection, where our branch members got to vote, but we also went out to the community and said, here's a couple of candidates. You help us decide who that was. I mean, I won that community pre-selection. I think about 1,500 community members voted.
Wow.
It was a lot. And then I think it was about 300 branch members. So, it wasn't small. And I had a very good, the guy that ran against me was a very good candidate, a man called Sean Mackin. It was a good process for us to go through. So that's sort of how that happened. You'll come to the next part, which of course is that I lost badly.
Well, there's no such thing as lost. Is again something
right.
that we try to, there's always the next time and learnings and networks that are established through that time as well. But you did happen to lose that one, but you had the opportunity to re-enter back into the Legislative Council. So
yeah, look, again, I this is where I feel like I have been incredibly lucky. So when I resigned from the upper house, because it was because the way that they did it is basically they left it open to wait till after the election to fill the position. But again, when I went to after I'd lost, hadn't won Newtown, I had another pre-selection because there's another person who put up his hand to fill that vacancy. So I wasn't automatically put back in. I did win the pre-selection, but I had to go through another process, and was the more traditional process in the Labor Party. The people who decide who are upper house and Senate spots are the delegates that go to our state conference. So half of them are unions and half of them are rank and file members of the Labor Party. It's about, in my cases, it was about 350 people decided who, whether I would get back in or not.
Yeah. Okay. So it's funny, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So saying lucky is part of it. I do understand that, but you had a significant profile, demonstrated capability for the job by that stage as well. So if you've been a councillor, you've been in the state parliament. Tell us, there's all sorts of things that you have worked on in both roles, I'm sure, and there will be some that you're particularly proud of, others that were more administrative to you. Like what is it that you've been able to achieve for your community through being a woman sitting in those parliamentary chambers, council chambers or state chambers, that you want to share with us?
I'll do the best things, I suppose. So the best thing that happened on Marrickville Council was that we were doing up the pools. And so we had 2 pools that were being refurbished. But the big thing for me was that there's a whole section in South Marrickville where people live in apartments. It's really hot. We actually had to close a pool. So the old local pool that had been there had closed many years ago. And I had this mad idea, which was that we should actually have a free open water play park. So that kids that green space is used a lot. People don't have access to the pool. The pools were going to cost a lot of money. I mean, I think now it's about $7 or $8 to go for a family. That's too expensive for some. And having this idea of a cool, lovely space. And so if you go down to Steel Park, down at the Bollawarra Villawarra Road, and you see that park there, we did that. And I was really involved in that. And so it remains one of the things that I do genuinely feel like I made a difference just by that. And the other things in the parliament are some things that people might know. As I said, I've sort of, Labor's been in opposition for a long time. Opposition is really hard. You don't have your hands on the levers of most of the decisions that are going on. But I have worked across Parliament on a bunch of different issues. In government, I worked right at the tail end of the Labor government. Clover Moore and I jointly sponsored the bill that allowed same-sex adoption in the state. Labor had done a whole lot of reform that had removed discrimination against same-sex couples, but we basically had to have a workaround the kind of major parties. And it was a conscience vote issue, which frees everyone up to actually do that. So that was the first one that Clover and I did, got up by 2 votes, but extraordinary. I had a picture at Mardi Gras this year of 2 young women who are now were little when their mums adopted them, and it was extremely exciting. Mm-hmm. And I've also then did a whole bunch of stuff on marriage equality. Obviously, that was really a federal thing rather than a state thing. But look, the 2 pieces of legislation that I've also been intimately involved was that Trevor Khan and I did safe access zones around Abortion clinics, if people don't know what that is, you might remember that reproductive health clinics, there's been this tradition of varying degrees of harassment of women and staff going in there. Other states had moved and actually provided, basically you're allowed to go to a health facility without being harassed on your way in, and it's called a safe access zone. So we managed to get that bill up, and that really led to abortion law reform, which was about getting abortion out of the Crimes Act and actually setting up a legal framework for it to occur in New South Wales. The reason why those all worked was because they were all conscience votes, which allowed relationships across the parliament, men and women, for us to work together and to have co-sponsors and to really work very strategically within our own political parties to gain support for those bills that were outside the party process. They don't happen very often, though.
Yeah, I suspect conscious votes might be a question from our alumni, and I only have a couple more questions, and then we'll open it up to attendees for their questions. Something we talk about, well, I've certainly talked about, Penny, is that, I was 40 years old and I'm 47 now, that when I understood that the Senate was the same thing as the upper house. I'm not embarrassed to admit it. I don't remember being taught it. I wasn't paying much attention. Had a lot of other things on my plate. So, and again, that's a void that we're trying to fill with our education programs. Now, you're in the Legislative Council, the upper house at the state level. How does your role compare to a federal senator's role in that way? Are there any comparisons? Is it totally
very similar? No, extremely similar. Extremely similar. The first thing I'd say is don't feel too bad. When I became the deputy leader of the Labor Party before the last state election, my son said to me, he's 17, he said to me, so you go to Canberra now? Like, so you can even live in a political household, and this is a kid who's been to every meeting and into Parliament with me. I used to bring him in when I first was elected because we didn't have childcare for him. So it's a real problem in terms of understanding it. But look, it's basically the same. I mean, upper houses exist, that they are supposed to exist, and they exist to basically be a break on executive government. So whoever the government of the day is, they form government because they've got a majority in the lower house. In the upper house, and sometimes the government of the day does manage to win enough support that they have an absolute majority in their own right, but the case in New South Wales definitely, and also in the Senate is less and less, is that the government of the day doesn't have the numbers. And our job is to scrutinise their roles, and we do that through being a second layer. So when laws are passed, they have to go through the lower house and they have to go to the upper house, do amendments, that sort of stuff. But also sort of inquiries and the sort of budget estimates process. If you're fans of Penny Wong on the budget estimates, she's pretty good. Grilling the public servants and the ministers of the day about what they're doing. And in the upper house, we also have we do a lot of inquiries. The biggest difference, though, I don't have a constituency in New South Wales. It's the whole state. Similarly, senators, whole state representation. So it's quite a different focus. And we have 11 crossbenchers in the upper house now: Animal Justice, One Nation, Shooters, Fishers, Farmers, Greens, Independents, Christian Democrats. They only need they sort of create their own issues and their own kind of things that they pursue, rather than being driven by your local area where you're fighting for a new school and you're fighting for a new hospital and that sort of thing. That's probably the easiest way to describe the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it is interesting. And do you have a lot of travel that is incorporated in that, or not necessarily?
Well, prior to COVID, I did. Like the rest of us, haven't been very well. So I'm the Shadow Minister for the Environment, and I was that. I have been that previously. I then was doing family and community services for a while. But no, I mean, yes, we do a lot of. I try to do a lot of travel, getting out to communities, actually talking to people on the ground, understanding how it works. I mean, I just don't. It's very easy to get stuck in Parliament House and not actually going and talking to real people. It is much better to do that. So yes, there is travel. There's also travel with inquiries. We're about to do a flood inquiry. We'll be spending 3 days on the North Coast, that sort of stuff. So yeah, you do. But it's, in fact, in some ways, it's more than lower house members who often are pretty much chained to their local area, particularly if they're marginal.
Yeah. Well, I'm keen to talk about being stuck in the parliamentary chamber, just in terms of what is available to you in terms of the ability to build rapport with other women across the aisle. In the lower house, you're sitting in the upper house. That we notice in Canberra that there's a complete lack of a cross-party women's caucus, which totally differentiates Australia from other OECD countries. How does the New South Wales Parliament work in terms of that ability to come together?
It kind of ebbs and flows a little. So I've been in Parliament for 16 years, so a long time. So I've seen it kind of ebb and flow. It just depends. There's often just a couple of women who are really keen to bring people together. And so there's this, these periods where you do a lot of that. And sometimes there's periods where there's less of that. I mean, just recently we just had a return, because we've been working remotely. We actually had a return to Parliament where everyone was invited. It was great. Like, we had about 15 or maybe 20 women turned up. So that was really good. From the Labor side, I mean, half of our caucus is women. We work a lot together, but through, so it happens that way. It happens through and around issues. So we're currently doing voluntary assisted dying, abortion law reform, LGBTI issues, a bunch of things. You sort of, again, conscience votes flash out people that kind of have the same view as you, and they're often constrained within the party system. And so you find these very funny people that as you're working together to get this outcome. That happens as well. And just over time, working on inquiries and those kind of things you do. I mean, I just am always on the lookout for people who I think are good at what they do, people that work hard, but also people who are fun. Like, there's just, you have to, being able to laugh at the job that we do when so much of it is so serious all the time, having people with that shared, acceptance of, one of my favourite stories is when we were doing the abortion law reform. So myself and Jo Halen, who had twins just before she was elected, one of her kids was unwell, and we were in this room, and Alex Greenwich and Brad Hazard and Trevor Khan and myself and Jo were there. But Jo had one of her kids who was sick. And we're literally in the middle of having this really heated discussion about, how we deal with these amendments and all this sort of stuff. The reason why the little one was in is that he was sick. So she just casually picks him up, walks over to the sink, and he's vomiting into the sink as we're just having this conversation. It's a very bonding experience when you go through those kind of things, male or female. It is how you make friends.
That's quite the story. And it was quite the outcome in 2019 as well. Those of us who live in New South Wales saw how people collaborated across the chamber to get those reforms through. And it always, it sticks with you about why can't it be thus all the time. That's the topic of a different session, not this session.
Yeah, that's a whole other session.
Yeah. Look, one more question from me, then we'll open it up to questions. But I do note that about approximately a year ago, you found yourself at loggerheads within your own party in terms of a specific policy that was being discussed at the time. That was the mandatory disease testing bill. And you resigned from all of your portfolios. Walk us through that process and your thought process and how your own values were being tested to ultimately make that decision, and how you came through it as well.
Look, hardest thing that I've ever done, the reason being that, within the Labor Party, you join up for collective decision making. That's exactly what you do. You fight often as hard as you want. You don't always get your own way, but you signed up to the outcome regardless. This was a very particular issue for me. As I said earlier, I'd been involved in HIV campaigns since I was a student, and I just was so... On the issue itself, I was just so frustrated that basically, the world's best AIDS response come out of New South Wales. There'd been bipartisanship. There'd been this absolute adherence to the science, to actually doing the right thing. And the bill that was passed basically it fails all of those tests. It was a populist view. It doesn't actually fix the problem it's supposed to be solving. And it just, for me, really took us backwards in terms of where we'd been for this world's best response. I fought really hard within the Labor Party to try and get that ameliorated, and I just I couldn't do it. And I really wasn't sure exactly what I would do. I knew that there were amendments going to go through, and we could have made it. If some of the amendments got up, I could have lived with it, even though I didn't love it, but I could have lived with it. And I just got to this point where I just said, I can't support this. I've been involved with this for so long. And so I didn't try to recruit everyone else to it or anything. It was just very much a private thing for me that I felt very strongly about. I knew that if I did that I'd have to resign from Shadow Cabinet. But I just decided that was just something that I had to do. I really don't want to do it again. And again, we sort of talk about luck through this. Luck isn't probably, but changing circumstances. I mean, I resigned from Shadow Cabinet. We then had a leadership change, and Chris Minns, as our new leader, said to me, "You did the wrong thing. Don't do it again. But I really want you back on the front bench, and I want you to be the leader in the upper house. So please come back, and we will forgive you." It's a big deal in the Labor Party. I mean, I didn't actually cross the floor, because to do that, I could have actually been expelled from the Labor Party. So it's a big deal. So I just abstained in the end, but I was pretty vocal. I made a vocal about it. So that's why that happened.
Yeah. Look, I think it's important to just to let everyone know about that process, because too often I think maybe some people deselect running for a party because they think they have no voice, no opportunity to change the course of thinking in the party as well. And you've demonstrated through your political career that in fact you can have a voice, and those voices are critical to changing the course that a party may be taking. So
yeah, I mean, look, as I said from the beginning too, I'm a very inside the tent person. I know that I don't get my own way all the time, but I've learned that tenacity and patience means that you can make change, and you don't win all the time. You've got to play a long game, and it's just there's a stubbornness in me about this too, which is that those that I disagree with, I'm just not prepared to just walk away and leave it to them. It's like, okay, I didn't win this time. I mean, the Labor Party took 10 years to change its position on marriage equality. Like Penny Wong and I spent 10 years doing that. If we had just walked away when it was something that was deeply personal to us, extremely hard for us to deal with in terms of the public position, we just weren't prepared to do that. And that's, I suppose, when you talk about Labor specifically, it's just sort of what you sign up for. And I'm comfortable with that. Like, it is what it is, with all of its, warts and all. But, for me, that's why it was hard to resign. Like, it's not what I believe in. I believe in the collective decision-making process through the Labor Party.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. And now you're leader of the upper house. Yes. So let's not diminish.
Yeah, very, again, fortunate that, because, my expectation was that I would resign. I was the deputy leader of the upper house at the time, that I had to resign from that, and I had to resign from Shadow Cabinet. I expected to be a backbencher, and probably was really expecting to think, where does my future lie? But I was prepared for that. Like, I wouldn't have done it if I did, I knew the consequences of what I was doing.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I want to open it up to any questions that anybody on the call might have. I hope I haven't asked them all. But does anyone want to raise their hand or put a question in the chat for me to moderate? We're tight enough of a group that are happy for you to take yourselves off mic, if that is easiest. There we go. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
The mic is yours.
Sorry. Oh, thank you. Okay, so my question is just very general, but I was struck by something you said, Alicia, about those opportunities that come for you to step up. So I've been a member of the Labor Party for about, I think, 4 or 5 years in my electorate, but like a lot of women my age, I am madly busy. So I have 3 sons. The youngest has just finished school a year ago. I full-time work, it's crazy. It's very hard to actually get to meetings and participate properly. But just recently, my branch, they didn't have anyone for the federal election. So they sent out an email saying, like, would anyone be willing to step forward for pre-selection? And I had one of those moments where I was driving home in the car and I just thought, okay, just do it. But I think, like Penny was saying, you don't feel ready. I don't feel ready. And so I did it anyway.
Good.
And I had to pitch.
I was just waiting for what you were going to say.
Well, I just had that moment where I was just like, I am so nervous just sending it off. And I was like, no, just press send. And then when they rang me back to talk about it, I almost didn't take the call, you know. And then I thought, no, just pick up the call, talk. Anyway, so I did my pitch, you know, and what really struck me is afterwards is that the other person pitching was a 26-year-old guy who said, I really believe I have all the qualifications needed and I'm totally like ready for this in my life. And I thought, he's lovely, right? This is nothing against him. He's lovely and he's keen and he's eager and he's spent his time in young labour at, you know, uni, whatever. But I just thought, I'm 54. I have a whole lifetime of working, raising kids, dealing with medical things and elderly parents and death and birth and schooling and education. I work in my community. I'm a music teacher, which sounds so lame, but actually, you know, I've actually spent my life, my working life, dealing with families, talking to families, long relationships with families, not just one off like 1 year with a kid, but I teach kids for 10 years, you know, and in my work as a music examiner, I've traveled all over the state. I know my state, you know, I know my electorate. And yet I just had this thing, my general question, okay, after all that blurb is, how does one package up one's life to present? Because, you know, you sort of think, this is me. I look at the Labor candidate for somewhere in Western Australia who has a master's degree in such and such from Harvard, and I think, oh my good, I'm not good enough for that. I look at Andrew Lee, who's a couple of years below me at school, from my school, and I'm like, well, Andrew has a PhD in economics, and of course that's what one needs, right? And then you just think to yourself, I'm not qualified enough. And I wonder if a lot of women do this and just edit themselves out instead of looking. Then I look at Parliament, and particularly federal Parliament at the moment, because it's very publicised, and you look at some of the people who sit there and you think, my God, they think they are good enough to represent the community.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
Melissa.
you know, how do women get past this, and how do you package up your life experience and patchy education that we all do because we drop in and out of postgraduate degrees and we can't finish them because, you know, we're madly raising children and working full time?
Yeah.
That's my question. Very long one.
Well, I think that your pitch was fine, by the way. But the first point I'd make is, and you know, Licia can probably quote this. You know, there's some study that talks about, you know, when jobs are advertised, and they say there's 10 criteria. If men have got 3, they basically apply. Women won't even think about it unless they've got 7. You know, so I just think there is this very inherent. It's really hard. We all do it. You've got to do it. Second thing is, politics is about community and connection in community, and just really wanting to fight for the place that you live and all of the people that live there, even when they're really different to you. It's about that basic idea that everyone should be, you know, part of our job is actually helping people negotiate horrible government systems and those kind of things. And so your experience compared to the 26-year-old who's probably, you know, barely out of home.
He's not out of home. He's
exactly. So he's ready. Well, good. Has he asked his mum? I mean, really?
No, but you know, the funny thing about the mum thing was our area has a really aging population, right? And I've just watched friends of mine deal with that, right? And all the anxiety around putting their dad into aged care, where the mother just felt frightened, right? Because she's heard so much of, and that's a real issue, right? There are a lot of elderly people here. And there's a lot of young migrant families as well. So it's an interesting kind of electorate. But the funny thing is, he said, I think the best way to reach people is through social media. I said, a lot of elderly people are not on social media. He said, no, they are. Like, my mum's on Facebook. And I felt like saying, sweetie, your mum is my age. That's not elderly.
No. I mean, you've got to do it. And look,
Melissa, I'm super.
Sorry?
Well, Licia, this is frozen. You froze, Licia.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, something, I don't know what happened then. This rain bomb Sydney's having possibly. Melissa, super keen to hear if you won pre-selection. Secondly, you didn't. That's all right. It's all right.
Yeah.
First time interview for you. I've put in the chat, come to one of our future events. Imposter syndrome, okay? Very gendered scenario, very gendered concept. And by no means, you know, we are very friendly to all men, but we want our candidates to have the confidence of a mediocre white man. That is basically what I will get put on a t-shirt one day.
Well, that's why I stepped up. I had that phrase in my head, you know, and I thought, what would a mediocre white man do? He would take the opportunity and
take the opportunity, and we can help you with the next few steps. No question about how to put together your CV, how to pitch yourself. We'll put you through. Ruth McGowan, my wonderful co-facilitator who's on this call, put you through a pre-selection exercise, mock interview, all those kind of things.
Yeah, that would be great. Because ultimately what Penny was saying is, ultimately what I want to help my community.
Yes.
You know, I really care passionately about education, and I've worked in all, you know, because the thing about being a musician is that you work everywhere. You work in low SES, high SES, super wealthy private schools. You go everywhere and you meet everyone in every system, you know, and I really care passionately about that and about educational outcomes. And I think ultimately that's my motivation for wanting to get into politics.
And we want to help you get elected as well. So I'm going to move to the next question.
Yes,
so thank you so much, Melissa. Xanthe, over to you. I'm not sure that you're off mute yet, Xanthe.
There we go. Hello again. Sorry about that. I guess my question really, so I live in a local government area. I was in the inner west for many, many years. I've just recently relocated back to the Central Coast. I'm also a public servant, and I've worked for the state government for a number of years, and I'm a town planner, a heritage specialist by trade. I'm interested in the revitalisation of Gosford, which is close to where I live now, and the council is under administration.
Yes,
I'm very interested.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very interested in. So I did the local government, the Office of Local Government sort of online tool the other day about, you know, the qualities that somebody should have. And I remember thinking that it did not match the mediocre white man test, but it was particularly designed for women. I thought it was interesting. And I thought, well, hang on, I can actually tick at least 7 boxes here. And I thought that it was something that I would be interested in doing, and there might be lead time. I'm not a member of a political party. I very much swing left occasionally because I lived in the inner west. It was either Labor or the Greens, and that's not the context of the political landscape that I have where I now live. And so my question is, again, I you know, like Melissa, I want to help my community. I want to be someone that could potentially use skills that I already have to advance a particular location and the people that live in that area. I honestly don't know where to start. Yeah. My question is, do I have to join a political party, you know, make that decision first? Do I have to go through all of those things? Like, I don't even think they've had their referendum yet to determine if they will go down from 15 to 9 representatives and the ward structure. So, you know, I'm paying attention to where it's up to, but I don't know how to sort of say, no one's tapped me on the shoulder, for example, but I'd be interested to say, I'm keen. How do I do that?
Yeah. It's a good question. It sort of depends a little bit on the pathway you want to take. I mean, there are Liberal councillors and there are Labor councillors on the Central Coast, and there's also independents. And I think that there is, at local government level, there's a lot more kind of independent space. The first thing you need to work out, and again, I'm just not across the detail of how, because it's been such a mess, Central Coast, but really just the first thing I'd say is just work out the nuts and bolts of how would you get elected? So if it's a ward structure, which ward are you in? Have a look at who else is actually in, who's the current councillors for that ward, because you can work back, you know, and then what I would do is actually look at the election results in terms of how many votes you need to be elected. I mean, that's just that really nuts and bolts. how many people do I think I can get to
Foundation.
vote for me?
Yeah.
Then the decision, I think, is look, is one of the political parties where you think you'd like to do that. The thing that I would watch, I mean, the thing to know with that though, again, is looking at who has already been elected. Have they been there a long time? Have they, are they looking like they're going? Sometimes you find out, oh, look, this is their last term and they're looking for someone. Because that's the one thing with political parties particularly is that, there is, there is some sort of succession planning, and there are people looking, and incumbency is, it's really hard to, if you were to charge in and say, oh, right, I'm going to knock off this old white bloke, generic, within the party structure, that might be quite hard. He's, been there for a long time and he's got a lot of support in the branches, because the Labor Party is a democratic organisation where we vote for our who gets precinct. So I think you just first of all work out where it is you are, who else is around, and then I think, and my only other advice is, so you can, whether the political party is for you. But the other thing is, what is one of the big local issues? Obviously heritage and planning, plenty of those issues on the Central Coast. And there's some really great different organisations around. You can be just active in, fighting for a new school, or, becoming, if you're connected to your community and build a profile through an issue. Yeah. I'd recommend a local government issue, but not necessarily. Can I say, a lot of the best women candidates we've had usually head up the local PNC. They know everyone. I
have a couple of years until my little one he's only 18 months old. So the other thing is,
but even to be plugged. Anyway, I just think that pathway is, find something that you really care about locally, that you can build a profile for yourself. And I can't tell you what that is. No. Also think about the parties. But the other thing too is, so in Gosford, you've got the wonderful Lisa Tesh, who's your local mayor. She is just fantastic. Honestly, if you rang up Lisa and said, can we have a cup of coffee? Sure. What do you reckon? Yeah, she would be able to tell you the lay of the land, what's likely to happen.
That's the issue, because all the councils are actually disbanded, so you can't actually see exactly who is there and who intends to, rerun. But I'm assuming a number of them will. But I can't really find that information. So I think, next step.
That's the bit, the secret squirrel stuff.
Yes, exactly. And Xanthe, I totally agree that Liesl would be just a wonderful connection to start, and would be very open to having a coffee. Absolutely. And then all the questions you've just asked about, how do I get started and what do I
probably
understand?
Has really specific answers for my area, which would be lovely.
The whole mission of Why Women for Election exists is to make what is currently a very opaque process more transparent. Yeah. And the idea that the more transparent you make it, the more likely that people, and I would say particularly women, are to step into that kind of, into that arena. So our Equip training workshop, which you can find online, runs through the A to Z of everything that you've just asked. Okay. So, and we ran workshops across regional New South Wales last year to fizz up the women of New South Wales to run in the local government elections. We didn't focus on the Central Coast because
we had our delays.
Weren't having elections. So, but look in the chat about some
I will. I've just seen those links. Yeah.
And we'd love to help you. So there's a question from. Sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you, Penny, for taking the time to speak with us today as well. I really appreciate it.
Alicia, I've just got to be back in my inquiry in about 7 minutes, so I might have to do the last one.
And I promised that you would be gone by that time. So, but there's a question from Daniel in the chat that I wanted to post to you. Hi Penny, great to see you. I think I'm the only male on this call. You are, Daniel, at the moment. We normally have a couple of men though that are on our calls. You know me, and I'm a feminist, which is why I'm here. Would you advise about the addition of women in politics also apply to people who are diverse, e.g., including living with a disability, diverse voices, etc.?
Daniel, I think you already know what my answer to this will be. Yes. I mean, look, I just have this basic view about our parliaments, which is that the issues that we have to deal with, and they're complicated and they're wicked problems. There's not easy solutions to most of the things that we're dealing with. I just fundamentally believe that who we need around the table needs to be as diverse as the community that we live in, because people bring experiences that others just simply don't understand. And the quality, problem solving is better. The quality of the discussion and the considerations that are taken into account is where it is. So people with disability, massive number of people in our community We do have members of parliament with disability, but probably not enough. We don't have enough women. We definitely don't have enough Aboriginal people. We don't have enough people from, and non-English speaking backgrounds, culturally and linguistically diverse. That's why I say NESB, because it's easier. But I just fundamentally believe, we've got to do it. Again, that's easier said than done. There's a real issue, and it's so much in the hands of political parties because they've got their hands in the pre-selection. But the Labor Party did it for women, and there's active and ongoing conversations. I mean, in our federal parliament now, we have 4 First Nations MPs. We're running an excellent Dr. Reid on the Central Coast. He's an Aboriginal doctor. We are doing some of that, but we've got a lot of internal discussions about whether people from Asian backgrounds and subcontinental backgrounds. It's a big issue for us, and we've got to do it. But all the parties have got to do it. Our parliament should look like our people. Is fundamentally my view.
Yes, and we thoroughly agree as well, Penny, and that's why we helped establish our sister organisation, Politics in Colour, that are facilitated by women of colour for First Nations and culturally diverse women, specifically so that we can help empower underrepresented parts of the community into public office as well. And in fact, we are about to launch, you can get the news here first, with the Victorian government, a series of workshops across regional Victoria, particularly focused on helping diverse voices into local government in Victoria. Women from the queer community, from the disabled community, First Nations women, young women. So that has a particular focus for that program as well. So anyone on the call from Victoria, please get in touch about how you might be able to amplify that and come to the workshops as well. Daniel,
Alicia, sorry, I'm really going to have to run because I've got to be there. I've got the opening question.
Up. So, you have to go to budget.
Thanks, everyone. I will leave.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, Penny. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody on the call. You go, fly.
I will.
Bye, Penny. Life of a politician. Thank you for your time, everybody. Please look at our website for our upcoming events through April and May, particularly our Equip candidate training, which I think is going to be particularly relevant to a couple of people on this call. And we look forward to seeing you at future events, including one later this month, a masterclass we're running on social media with Zara Seidler, who's the co-founder of the Daily Oz. If you don't follow the Daily Oz on Instagram, start now. She has built quite a news empire on social media. So thank you again, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.